Hello, everyone. It's so exciting to be in front of so many alumni and current students, entrepreneurs and investors. And my hope is that I can inspire you to think about entrepreneurship with a lens of sustainability and impact. So Autodesk makes software for product design and manufacturing, architecture, engineering and construction, and media and entertainment. You may know some of our products. AutoCAD is 40 plus years old. It's been around forever. We have Revit, we have Fusions, one of our newer cloud-based mechanical design products, and we have products like Maya in media and entertainment. And I thought what I would do is to best show you what we do is to really show you what our customers do. So I have a short video here.
Crack open the window.
Oh, that's better.
So hopefully you recognize some characters, maybe some buildings and some products that you use out there in the real world from our customers. So I'm always very excited to talk about Autodesk and our customers, but I'm more excited when I get to talk about Cornell and Autodesk at the same time. So this was me in 1988. I was a junior studying electrical engineering up in Ithaca, and I'm a little brave to show that photo of me, but any of you here from the class of 80 something? You know, there must be a couple up. There's a few, very few of us representing. So, okay, all fun with the introductions. Now I want to get into some serious business and talk about sustainability. So why are we here? Well, by 2050, there's going to be 10 billion people on this planet. And that means we need more televisions, more cell phones, more roads, more bridges, more housing, pretty much more of everything. And we also need more energy and materials to build and operate all of this more. And if we continue to do it in the same way that we've been doing it today, you know, the planet just can't sustain that kind of growth and development. Additionally, you know, climate change is becoming a huge problem. I'm not going to make this presentation all about climate change, but I think you probably all have your own experiences with some, you know, devastating event that's happened somewhere in the world for you. I live in California. If I think about, you know, the horrible droughts and fires on the West Coast, the, you know, terrible accelerating hurricanes in the Southeast, flooding in the Midwest and all over the world. I mean, it just doesn't stop when you open up the newspaper every day. So the pace of change here, in my mind, needs to also accelerate the pace of innovation in this space. But the good news is, and you heard some about little themes of this throughout the day, that there's actually real business opportunity here in solving these problems. So as we look forward into this presentation, I'm going to share 3 areas where we're seeing a lot of potential for innovation and also, you know, very solid business propositions here as well. So I'm going to talk about carbon, I'm going to talk about water, and I'm going to talk about waste. So first up with carbon. As I go through each of these, I'm going to talk about companies, Autodesk customers and foundation grantees that are doing things in the present day that are impacting these three areas, that are doing things that in the near future will be impacting them, and also some longer term bets that people are placing in these areas. So I'll talk first about carbon. 40% of global emissions come from buildings. So this is us sitting here today, the lighting, the heating, all the ventilation. 40% of all of the global emissions come from us, living, working in buildings. And then another 19% comes from manufacturing processes. So these are target-rich environments for improvements. Impacts here can stand to have a very broad impact elsewhere. So let's talk about some of the now. So my first example is carbon capture. How timely. So this is a startup called Heirloom, and they are working on carbon capture, as we just heard about from one of our Cornell professors. And what they're doing is looking at a low-cost and scalable natural mineral solution to extract carbon from the air. Because science believes that we can't just reduce our carbon emissions, we also have to start extracting carbon from the air. So this is an example of a startup, and what they believe is that they can get it down to $50 per ton with their process. So it's funny, when they asked about competition, I think this is a space, and this company believes we're going to start to see another kind of sub-industry here for clean carbon capture that is a space that will be ripe for innovation for sure. Another area that companies are looking at is how do they reduce embodied carbon in a building. So if we think about carbon, there's two kinds that make up total carbon. There's the operating carbon that I just mentioned, which is running all the buildings, and there's the embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is the carbon that shows up from all of the building materials, all of the building processes, all of the furniture in here. And so those two things together make up the carbon footprint of a building. So Microsoft just recently completed a campus expansion in Redmond, and they added 17 new buildings, and they set a goal to reduce the embodied carbon in those buildings by 30%. And so they worked with their contractor Skanska, and they used a carbon calculator called EC3 to kind of figure this out. And the great news about this was they hit their 30% reduction, and they also met all their other project goals, all their cost goals, all their schedule goals. So achieving this sustainable outcome did not have an impact on their overall business objectives for these buildings. So let's think a little bit more about what are things that are happening now that will help us kind of in the near future. So here's an example of innovation happening in materials. So this is Bamcor. They are a company that makes building components basically out of bamboo. And they do it via prefabrication. So they create those walls, those door openings all off-site, and then they bring them on to the job site. So they're reducing carbon both with the bamboo, but they're also reducing it with the prefabrication processes. And the good news about their process is it also is 60% more thermally efficient than a standard, normally constructed wall. So they're getting it from multiple different angles here. This is a cool project in Norway. It's called Wild. It's a human-made floating island, and it's designed to be both a residential space and a tourist destination. And it's designed to be self-contained. So it will create its own power, its own clean water. They have greenhouses, they have solar panels, they have kind of trying to build this self-contained environment that can be fully self-sustaining. And to do this, they also leveraged something called generative design, because they had lots of competing constraints to try to work on all these design criteria. So one of the results of that was they ended up with 15,000 square meters of solar roofing that's contributing to almost 79,000 kilos of CO2 saved with these roofs. So this is an example of kind of multiple goals being met by leveraging generative design capability, and also getting the design done faster using this type of automation. So into the future, what are people looking at now? Did you know that concrete was the second most prevalent substance on the planet? I'm sure you knew. And what's the first? I can see it if I look out the window. Come on, it's water. But truly, concrete's like 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. It's vast and massive and a real serious problem. So there's innovation also happening to come up with substances that are just as durable, just as reliable, as inexpensive as concrete. And this is a customer here who's doing carbon negative biocement. So they're using some new materials to kind of replace the concrete and fabricate it in the same type of format so it can be used in the same way. And so again, it's early for them, but they believe that they'll be able to get rid of 1,200 MMTs of CO2 emissions by 2050 as they evolve their process. That would be 20 to 30% of the global carbon emissions for concrete. So that's a pretty big, ambitious goal that they have, and I hope that they're successful. Also, I wanted to talk about Cornell. Cornell's definitely leading the way with lots of sustainability practices on campus. You may or may not know this. I read about some of it in my alumni magazine, but you know, there's carbon neutral goals for campus. And so 20% of campus electricity needs are met today by solar panels, which is great. 20 million kilowatt hours have been saved with cooling. And then the project I'm kind of excited about, because I'm sort of a nerdy engineer, is the drilling that they're doing on campus to get to the geothermal heat that is underneath campus that could be used to heat the buildings. So excited to see this kind of innovation happening at my alma mater and yours. So let's switch gears and talk about water. Water is really a very big problem for the world. I mentioned I live in California. Anybody else out here live in a drought area or in the Bay Area? I mean, it's pretty devastating when you see what is happening with the droughts and the lack of water. 73 million people across the world live in countries that have high degrees of water insecurity and water stress. I mean, that's just a massive, massive problem. To make that even worse, we waste 8 trillion gallons of water every year. And this is water that has been cleaned and is ready to go into homes and schools and, you know, hospitals and businesses, and it just is wasted through the aging infrastructure that we have and the lack of digitization to be able to really manage these systems. So this is a tremendous area for improvement. And if we look at things that are happening now, any of you ever been subject to a you must boil your water before you can use it kind of thing? Anybody? I see a few. My daughter lives in New Orleans. It happens there a lot. And so what happened here, this is in Bristol in the UK. This is a company that supplies water to about 1 million people. They had a bacteria in their water, the kind that causes like diarrhea and nausea and vomiting and all that. So they had to shut down a whole portion of their water facility, drain everything, figure out how to clean it, figure out how to safely get it back up online. So they had 17,000 people who had to basically boil their water and couldn't use it for sanitary purposes. And so what they did was they deployed hydraulic modeling, and they had their engineers come and do a bunch of modeling and simulation to figure out how quickly and reliably they could get the system back up. So they were able to do it in 24 hours, which is really a very significant impact in this kind of disaster here. Another way where we see a lot of work happening in water is on more the kind of social startups. So this is a company that Autodesk Foundation has invested in called Splash. They're working on bringing water, sanitation, hand washing, all those kinds of things to some of the largest cities in the world that just don't have, where the kids really just don't have access to water. So to date, they're using modern manufacturing capabilities, things like fusion, to enable them to really rapidly produce these sanitation systems at a cost-effective way, and they've already been able to distribute 2,100 of them around the world. So what's happening in the next near term there on water? So I'm going to take you around the world. Anybody here from Toledo? That's kind of far away. Probably not. Okay. So in 2014, the Toledo Water Authority had it was called a toxic algae bloom, and they had multiple days where no one in Toledo had any water because they had an 80-year-old system and they could not get it back up very quickly. So as a result of that, they hired this company Arcadis, who's a big contractor in water and other spaces, to come in and really modernize their overall water ecosystem. And so they did this using a lot of modern technology, cloud collaboration, 3D modeling, and now they have an actual model of their water ecosystem, and they can prevent these kind of disasters from happening in the future. Another thing that's happening in water is digital twins. How many of you know what a digital twin is? Probably a bunch of you do. So a digital twin is basically a digital or computer representation of a physical thing. So people are making them for everything these days, whether it's buildings, theme parks, water systems. And if you think about like almost an avatar in a metaverse, that's kind of like a digital twin of a person. So there's lots and lots of digital twin things happening out there. And in water, people are using them so they can take all the real-time data they're getting off of the water system, and they can start to predict what's going to happen and anticipate sort of disasters before they occur, because they now have vast amounts of historical data that they can now use AI and machine learning to kind of predict the future. So that's what this company, Thames Water, is doing. Thames Water provides all the water for London and the surrounding areas. It's over 9 million people. And so they're really going in and building this awesome digital twin of their entire ecosystem. So further into the future, as you can imagine, there's more technology, more AI, machine learning coming here. This is a really cool project. This is the first smart canal in Europe. And it's going to be, it's in Scotland and it's near Glasgow. And what they're doing is they're building the canal in a way that it can absorb floodwater. So they're installing sensors, they're connecting their whole system up to weather data, rainfall data, and if they know that a storm is coming, they can adjust the canal so it can consume 55,000 cubic metric, I forget something, of water, so that it's about 22 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And so, so they can prevent flooding from this area that has flooded very frequently by how they rebuild this canal. The cool thing about that was they recovered 110 hectares of land that they can now build on because it's not going to flood anymore. And they also saved 5,000 tons of carbon in the process, or they will when they're done building it. So here's one more fun example, and this is using AI and machine learning to control the formulas that clean the water. So as water goes through a treatment plant, all kinds of chemicals are used to kind of get it to be in the right condition for it to be clean for us to use. And so Anglian Water, also in the UK, has been installing some AI that allows them to monitor this very closely and reduce the amount of chemicals they're using and make sure that the water is really high quality all the time. And the good thing about this is it helped them save 150,000 pounds in just their first project. So as this projects, year on year, project on project, they're going to save a ton of money doing this and also use fewer chemicals and deliver a better product for their customers. So next up, we can talk about waste. When I'm done with this presentation, you're never going to think about construction in the same way between the concrete and the stuff I'll share with you now. So 1/3 of the waste in landfills across the developed nations comes from construction. It's just a horribly wasteful process. Whether you're demolishing something, building something, all the leftover pieces, making mistakes, it's terribly, terribly wasteful. And in Europe, another statistic that's interesting is 10% in Europe alone of the waste comes from manufacturing. So buildings and construction are definitely the biggest target for improvement, but manufacturing also has plenty to contribute here as well. So if we look at a couple of now projects, all right, this is a cool one. So this is a sunglass company that's leveraging the principles of circularity. So what they've done is created these sustainable sunglasses. They're the plastic they use comes from reclaimed plastic from the ocean. And then they've created a process by which when you're done with them, you send it back. They recycle it. They get it back to the chemicals and materials that they need. And then they make a new pair of sunglasses and then can sell that to someone else. So that's this notion of circularity. And they're very passionate about this process. And they're excited because they've made it easy. And it's a great demonstration of what people should be aspiring for if they're looking to build things that are actually, truly circular. And so they're expecting that by 2050, they'll have mitigated 1,200 MMTs of CO2 by that time. Okay, and this is another one. I talked to a couple of you about this earlier. So this is Pallet. Pallet is a company that is using prefabrication and sustainable offsite building principles to create shelter villages for people who are transitioning from being homeless before they kind of move into a more permanent residence. And so they've done over 60 shelter villages in the United States. And the other cool thing about this, relevant to one of our speakers this morning, is that they're retraining formerly incarcerated individuals and having them learn the manufacturing skills to build these shelters. They also, quite frankly, were able to build more appropriate shelters because they were involving the people who were going to live in them in the process of building them. So this is a great success story of something that is, reducing the carbon that would be needed to normally do this by using great manufacturing techniques, but also doing good in other ways. So a little bit more on waste in the near term. Factory OS is a startup in the Bay Area they're building low-income housing in a factory, basically. They build these units, that's kind of at the beginning of the process there. And then once they're all done, it takes about 10 days to build a building's worth of these. Then they bring them to the site and they stack them up on top of each other and then kind of finish by connecting all the systems. And so doing something like this with traditional on-site construction mechanisms would take at least a year. And here they're doing it in a matter of days. The great thing about this is there's much less waste. There's much less materials. It happens a lot faster because it's a repeatable process that's happening in a factory. And it is also much safer for the workers. This type of sort of factory work is far safer than being on a construction job site. So there's lots of great benefits to doing things like this. And it's also cheaper too. So I wanted to ask, is Greek Peak still in business? Awesome. So, okay. Somebody needs to get a pair of these cool skis and go there this winter. All right. So this company is engineering skis for microalgae. So normally skis are made out of a lot of petroleum products, but in this case, they're using microalgae to make these skis. And to do this, though, they had to create a lot of new manufacturing processes because they've got new materials and new ways of designing. So they also use generative design here to try to figure out how they were going to get through this process. And in doing so, they have also 2 pounds less of waste per each ski, which does make me wonder that making skis must have a lot of waste in general. But they have 2 pounds less. And the cool thing here is the microalgae is a renewable resource. It grows in like 5 to 7 days, whereas fossil fuels take millions of years. So there's a lot of benefits to the explorations that these people are doing here. Okay, further into the future. The other really cool thing here is that business models can also drive sustainable change. And so this Signify is a brand owned by Philips. And what they're doing is something called lighting as a service. So what they're doing is providing industrial lighting, and basically the customer pays by the light or by the month. They pay a fee for the lighting. But so they've created a circular ecosystem here where they own all the equipment, they own the bulbs, they have optimized everything for reuse and recycling. And so instead of a facilities team maybe throwing things away or not being able to get them fully recycled, if you subscribe to your lighting, this company comes in and takes care of all that for you. And they're finding things that like their bulbs last 75% longer because they built them in this kind of intended for this process. So this is kind of a combination of business model plus engineering coming in with something that yields a more sustainable result. And then, okay, we talked about sunglasses, talked about skis, now we can talk about bicycles. And the point I want to leave you with this example is that the consumer products we use are just ripe for innovation around sustainability. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So carbon fiber is typically what's used for high performance bikes. It's really, really, really hard to recycle. And so Decathlon has decided to move away from carbon fiber, and they're starting to use aluminum. They're going to use a 3D printing process that allows them actually to have highly customized bikes, as well as controls cost and has better materials and is more flexible and more sustainable. So they're able to meet multiple business outcomes by making this change away from the carbon fiber. So with that, I hope I inspired you a little bit with some of these examples. And I really believe that the great minds in the room here can help us all make a difference for the world. There's so much innovation that can happen around sustainability. And the great thing about it is we've seen over and over again, it's good for business and it's good for the planet. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions.
So Amy, I actually have a question.
Allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, I have my own mic. I guess I'm special. So I've been talking a lot with people lately about the government's seemingly inability, or maybe they just don't want to build a waterway system that would transport water around the country.
Oh.
Because it seems like they could put pipes next to a highway, and I mean the land use issues can't be that difficult. The highway's already there. Do you have any idea why this isn't happening? Like, so we could get water from the Northeast to California, for example.
I would love that. I don't have a firm answer for that, but I have a hypothesis that I've learned about. So unlike many things in this country that are run by the federal government, water is a local thing. So there is no, the federal government doesn't really have jurisdiction over water in the way they do some of these other things. And so, I mean, they're having trouble I mean, even right now, it took forever to get the infrastructure bill passed for those things, right? And that money's just starting to dribble out now to help with a bunch of other problems that also relate to sustainability. But I think there's invention to happen with water distribution also, because it's
with floods. I mean, if they could have pumped the water from Florida into Lake Mead, I mean, they probably could have filled the lake. I mean, so it just seems like there's a big missed opportunity. I know it's the government.
I agree.
I would love it if you could solve that.
Okay, we'll get on that. Who wants to help me? Well, someone over there.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm from the construction industry, so specific regarding digital twin. Does Autodesk have specific strategy for leveraging digital twin technology outside of the infrastructural world, like let's say the actual building industry, architecture? I would like to hear some from specific you.
We do. We kind of have an internal incubation project going on around digital twins. It's called Tandem, and you can look it up online. And it basically, the good thing here is we've got the data from when the building was designed, and if we can just bring that data all the way through to the owner, then we can start to build a digital twin on top of that data. And so what's happening right now is IoT has been great for the notion of digital twins. So now everything will have sensors on it, and we can start connecting that sensor data to a 3D model of whatever the built asset is, and then be able to operate that much better. So if you think about better control over the energy being used, better predictive maintenance, so that we're not having failures, we're getting ahead of problems, and keeping things running more smoothly. So that's a huge whole other presentation that helps with sustainability also.
Hi, 91 AA. So I
Very
remember
nice.
you actually. The question I had was around digital twins. Are you doing anything around augmented reality? Does Autodesk have that ability to take the digital twin and create an augmented reality model for, let's say, service, for example?
We do. We made an acquisition. We're very acquisitive, by the way, for those of you that start companies. But we acquired a company called The Wild that does exactly that. It will do that for digital twins. It will also do it for the design process, because there's a lot of complexity in doing buildings like this, and being able to walk through in a fully immersive environment and look at what happens before you build it is really helpful too.
Hello, hi. Great presentation, by the way. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I love Autodesk products. And I really liked your presentation, your talk about sustainability and what Autodesk is doing and this type of startups. Can you share your, I don't know, the project that you're most interested in and what you think is going to make the most impactful, reduction in carbon footprint and sustainability? All wonderful projects you talked about today.
There's a piece of sustainability I didn't talk about here, and that's building renovation. So there's a bunch of legislation in Europe and coming elsewhere about renovating all the old building stock to be more. Basically, it's heating. So if you've been to Europe and you look at all those old buildings everywhere, I mean, or actually if you're on campus, and I don't know how well some of the buildings are. They weren't great when I was there, but 100, 200, 300-year-old buildings are not really sustainable. So there's a lot of projects that are going to be happening now to do renovation on these buildings all over the world. And what's cool is we need new technology for this, because there's no models, there's no drawings, there's not a lot of digital data that will help you do it. And so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things happening with laser scanning. And so scanning so that you can then get a model, and then figuring out, okay, what do I adapt? What do I change? What do I keep? What do I throw away, which is unfortunate. So I think all that is something I'm really excited about.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming to speak with us today. My name is JJ. My question is, do you think in the near future there's going to be stricter laws around sustainability or like carbon emissions, either in the US or in Europe, that's going to really help these startups take off, making, say, like, reducing carbon emissions a requirement rather than something that's, just good for business? And if so, what do you think those laws would look like?
I believe in Europe there will be laws. There are already a bunch of laws in Europe. And that's where some of this notion about you must renovate these buildings, they have to be, have certain requirements. I'm not very optimistic that in the United States we're going to have any laws about this anytime soon. I mean, in California we have all these laws, and the federal government keeps trying to tell us we're not allowed to have them. So, but what I think will happen in the U.S. is the companies will fill in the gaps. I mean, the Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they're building all these data centers. They also all have carbon neutral goals for like 2030, I think is the AWS one. And so they're going to drive a lot of innovation because they've decided as companies that it's not okay. We can't, we have to be part of the solution. So I think that will be a real driver for a lot of innovation and a lot of, I think, startups, all kinds of things. The AI, the simulation, the machine learning, all these things play a role here.
Awesome. Thank you.
We have time for one or two more. Any other questions? I see one over there, Amanda. Oh, one. Go ahead first here.
Hi, Aruna and all saying 1986 material science.
Excellent.
Very good stuff. I'm currently working for a broker-dealer that invests in companies that are privately held. And we've got one really amazing one that does basically takes apartments and refurbishes them to be green.
Oh, cool.
And it's an investment project. So you make money by investing in this, but they also are able to keep the rent low for the people that are in the building. I say that because it seems like it's so aligned with what you guys do. Do you actually have like an investment arm or anything like that? Or is it more acquisition based on your portfolio?
We have this organization called the Autodesk Foundation, and they invest, like a bunch of these little companies I showed, we're investors in those. So we do have an investment arm, and we invest in things that are kind of aligned to our purpose and mission and all that. So I would love to talk to you. Was this the one that was covered in the New York Times recently? Because there was a big article about replacing all the refrigerators in some building, yielding a tremendous improvement in energy on the building.
I don't think so. And I'll tell you one of the things they talked about. They talked about the greediness of investors. And they were heartbroken because they partnered with a capital firm, and they didn't do all the good things they really wanted to do. And so I think what's neat is they're coming back at it with a vengeance, trying to find good people to do good things. So they get you excited, right? When you talk about you get super pumped, like these are one of the guys.
Awesome. Well, I would love to learn more about that.
Sounds great. Thanks.
All right, one more?
Yes, Amy, thank you. My question relates to inflation. My concerns are if there's all these opportunities in the sustainability space, under periods of 0% interest rates, under periods of, easier growth. Are there alternative supply chains that can boost the use of more sustainable materials, or are those being set up? I could easily see those being mistakenly not seen or taken into account.
I haven't seen as much happening on supply chains. What I have seen more now, because all of our customers, whether it's manufacturing or construction or film and game, they can't hire enough employees to do the work they have. So there's a lot of desire to do things better because they just don't have the humans to do things the old way. So a lot of that means more automation, more AI machine learning, and for construction it means more prefabrication. So it means it's much cheaper and faster if they can build parts of the building off-site and then bring them on-site. So I think the supply chain pressures and those kind of things might accelerate this notion of prefab in construction. So I do want to let you all know that we're hiring, because we are. But Autodesk posts our intern things rather late, so we just posted our intern recs a couple of weeks ago. So there's lots of intern openings, but also we are hiring full-time individuals all over the world, all over the United States. So if you ever see anything of interest, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I love hiring Cornell people. We have 3 Cornell grads on CEO staff. It's very exciting to have all these Cornell people in my life. So, all right. Well, thank you all. Much appreciated.